Hello, hi, welcome everyone. So excited to have you here. We can give it a couple minutes before we get started, but we thought to start it would be fun if everyone wanted to maybe write in the chat with what grades you work with, or maybe say where you're coming from. Thank you, that's so great. Love to see where everyone's coming from. Awesome, this is so exciting. Looks like we have people from all over. Doing a lot of elementary, a lot of high school. This is awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Brittany Brunel. I'm co-founder of Everyday Speech. And again, I'm just really excited to welcome everyone to our webinar today. It's called From Compliance to Empowerment, Neurodiversity-Affirming Practices for Student Support Teams. Again, I'm Brittany. I'm the co-founder of Everyday Speech, and I'm going to be your moderator for today. I'm an SLP. I founded our company after working in the schools and really seeing the power of video modeling, which we'll talk a little bit about today. But we're also going to explore how to move away from traditional compliance-based approaches and adopt practices that empower neurodivergent students. All right, so before we get into our topic for today, I did want to share some community guidelines to really help ground our conversations today. So the first one being to respect diverse perspectives, acknowledge that everyone brings unique experiences and viewpoints. So speak from your own perspective and listen actively without judgment. The second one being to assume a positive intent. So approaching the comments and questions with the assumption that they're coming from a place of curiosity or genuine concern, even if they're different from your own beliefs. And lastly, to practice constructive communication. So avoiding personal attacks or dismissive language, critiquing ideas but not individuals, and focus on building understanding rather than winning an argument. So, especially with our topic today, I just want to acknowledge that we all come from a place where we want to help students. That's why we're here. I'm sure we all have a bit of shared experiences too, as research develops in the field. Some concepts become outdated, and we all want to do our best to serve the children, the families, and the communities around us. At Everyday Speech, we've had to learn and rethink the ways that we approach teaching social skills as the landscape have changed over the past couple of years. So, we're taking responsibility for staying current and up to date, but at the same time, acknowledging that learning is iterative. Our goal is to equip learners with the tools they need to be successful, however, they are defining that for themselves. And with that, let me introduce our speaker today, Casey Reeves. She is the curriculum lead at Everyday Speech and an experienced educator and advocate for neurodiversity-affirming practices.
Thank you, Brittany. I'm so excited to be presenting today and have the opportunity to connect with such a diverse group of educators. So as a former school-based speech language pathologist myself, today's topic of neurodiversity affirming practices is an area that I really care deeply about. Not only when I was working directly with students in the therapy room, but also in my current role at Everyday Speech as I work alongside Brittany and other mental health professionals to develop materials that best support our neurodivergent learners. So for today's agenda, we're going to start by talking about the old way. So really how we used to approach social skills training and now how we want to move and understand that shift. So, and then we'll move over to how discussing some practical tools and neurodiversity affirming strategies that we can use in the therapy room and the classroom to best support our students' unique learning needs. And last, we'll kind of end the webinar with a recap of the information we covered today and a Q&A session where you can ask some of your questions. Let's jump right in. Okay, so I want to start by just acknowledging the old way. So many traditional practices emphasize compliance and conformity, often at the expense of our students' authenticity and well-being. There is more and more research coming out that shows that these approaches can cause anxiety and erode self-identity and contribute to burnout among neurodivergent students. So when I was applying for grad school, I remember one of the essay questions asking me what it meant to be a lifelong learner as an SLP. And at that time, I don't really think it quite resonated with me, the impact and how important that concept would be in my career. I believe we can all agree that some of the information we learned in grad school is a bit outdated. And, we're in a field that is constantly changing. There's new research, we're gathering more information from our students, learning from our students, and it's not black and white. So, that is certainly a challenge at times. So on the bad days, we might feel like we could be doing more for our students, or we might feel like the imposter syndrome voice is extra loud. And I want to say that the good news is when we know better, we can do better. So I want to really frame today's topic as an opportunity for growth and positive change, and not one of guilt or shame. To kick us off a little bit, I'm going to lay a little bit of groundwork here. I'm sure these are some concepts that you might have heard of or you're familiar with, but they are central to our discussion today. So I thought we would just define them a bit and dig into them and give some practical examples. So the first one is masking. And masking can be an unconscious strategy that people develop to connect with others. So, however, it can be harmful. And we know that based on some more current literature and research, especially for autistic people who may feel a pressure to fit in with a non-autistic culture. So masking can lead to burnout, exhaustion, worsening mental health, and it does usually involve suppressing of certain behaviors that an autistic person finds soothing, such as stimming or intense interests. So with this comes a great need to be like others. So to avoid prejudice and judgment that comes with being different. Miller, Reese, and Pearson found that when surveying autistic individuals, some aspects of masking are shared across autistic and non-autistic individuals. So this included mimicry of others as a social strategy or feeling exhausted from masking. All groups reported that masking made them feel disconnected from their true sense of identity and had a negative effect on them. Both autistic and non-autistic people said that masking made them really unhappy, and it made them feel like people did not really know the real them. Other aspects of masking seem more specific to autistic people, such as sensory suppression and sadly, even suicidal ideation. So with this information in mind, the goal should be to assist our students in feeling that they can communicate authentically and confidently while still finding a balance in successful social interactions with their neurotypical peers. The second concept I have here on the screen is the double empathy problem. So this was coined by Dr. Damian Milton, and this concept explains that communication breakdowns between neurodiverse and neurotypical individuals stem from a mutual misunderstanding, not a deficiency in the neurodiverse person. So there's three things. When educators actively address this, we can see neurodivergent students feel valued and respected for their authentic selves. We also see neurotypical peers learn to appreciate diverse perspectives and develop deeper social emotional skills. And last, the learning environment becomes more inclusive, supportive, and collaborative for everyone. Personally, a little story, one way that I found was helpful to address the double empathy problem was to host a weekly lunch group for my elementary students. Students were encouraged to invite a peer from their class, which was, oops, did my screen disappear for everyone? Oh, just for me. Let me see if I can.
Nope, we can still see fine.
Oh, so odd. It said paused. Let me just see if I can pull it back up so
Sure,
I can
no
drive
worries.
the ship adequately.
No worries. And it's amazing to keep seeing everybody. Thank you so much for continuing to place in the chat where you are all coming from and who you work with. This is really exciting for us just to see the wide breadth of people and from all over. Let's see. We're also getting
Awesome.
requests to slow it down a bit. So I think we can, once
Sure.
everything's up and running, we can go a little bit slower. I know we're trying to fit everything in. We have so much we want to share.
Yes, no, that's great feedback. I appreciate that. All right, I got it back up and running on my screen so I can see what you see, which is great. I was just sharing a little bit of a tidbit. When I was in the school system, one way that I could approach the double empathy problem was to host a weekly lunch group. So this was for my neurodivergent students on my caseload, and I would encourage them to invite a peer from their class who is often neurotypical to join us for lunch in a little indoor recess. The small group setting was a great way for my students to interact with a preferred peer in a low stakes setting. So Depending on my students' comfort level, they were encouraged to share their play or communication style preferences with their peers. So I also use this time to model something, what I like to call curiosity without judgment. I think this is tough for some of the neurotypical elementary students to really they have an awareness of their neurodiverse peers' behaviors, but they don't adequately know what to say or do to understand their peers. So practices, an example of what this could look like is I could ask questions in the group and say something like, Jack, I noticed you like rocking in your chair. Does that help you focus? So this is just one example of approaching that double empathy problem and really inviting the neurotypical peers in to have a greater understanding of their neurodiverse peers. And ultimately, the goal is really just to not to make students conform, but to empower them to navigate the world as their true self. Okay, so now we're going to talk tools and strategies. We laid a little bit of the groundwork. We talked about some of the research. We do have some other research sprinkled in here to kind of support some of these strategies. But I want to frame our next discussion as we go through these tools and strategies. I want to start by just taking a moment to reflect on some of our common practices. We're all here because we care deeply about our students and helping them thrive, but sometimes the approaches we've traditionally used might not be as helpful as we intended, and that's okay. So teaching is really about evolving and learning. I gave that little personal story at the beginning about being a lifelong learner, and I think that is so important to what we do. So I'm going to introduce each strategy by highlighting the old way and why we might want to move away from that, and it may not have worked as well as we originally intended. And again, not about judgment, but finding even better ways to support our students. The first strategy is emotional self-identification over social expectations. So let's start by thinking about how we've handled emotions with our neurodivergent students in the past. Sometimes we focus on encouraging students to act calm or show what's considered to be appropriate behavior without first helping them just understand their emotions. So while this might work in the short term, it can send the message that certain emotions are bad, which leads to depression and confusion in our students oftentimes. So instead, what if we taught students to first name and recognize their emotions? Imagine how powerful it would be for a student to say, I feel frustrated because my project isn't turning out how I planned, and to understand how that frustration really feels in their body. This shift builds emotional awareness and lays the foundation for regulation that feels good for everyone, and most importantly, our students. Rather than emphasizing appropriate emotions, begin with self-identifying and understanding their emotions. So we encourage our students to name their feelings and notice how these emotions manifest in their own bodies. This foundational work empowers them to recognize their experiences without judgment and learn strategies to communicate with them more effectively. This second strategy is to seek individual perspectives. So I want to think about how we've approached goal setting and intervention in the past. I know I can speak personally that when it was time for IEPs, I would, talk to gen ed teachers, other specialists, parents and guardians, but rarely did I actually stop and talk for my students' input. So sometimes we focus on implementing rigid goals like mandatory eye contact or scripted greetings, often prioritizing what we as educators or therapists, think is important. While these practices might seem effective for teaching compliance, they can inadvertently ignore the child's comfort, preferences, and natural communication style. So when we disregard a student's signals, whether verbal or nonverbal, it can lead to frustration, disengagement, and even mistrust. Imagine a student repeatedly averting their gaze or showing distress during an interaction. But instead of acknowledging their discomfort, we insist on practice to make them conform. What message does this really send? In a recent research study, autistic adults were surveyed and they were asked about how acceptable they found various practices and intervention for young autistic children. The survey results found it was generally best to consider the individual child's perspective when determining goals, learning contexts, and interventions. The authors discussed ways to include children in the decision-making, like honoring indicators of assent or dissent, building on strengths, identifying and incorporating preferences, and prioritizing communication so that children can learn to self-advocate more effectively. So with this information in mind, what if we focus on truly understanding the perspectives of our students? This could mean observing how a nonverbal student, expresses themselves, collaborating with caregivers for deeper insights into the child's preferences, or creating opportunities for students to communicate, whether that's through AAC or other preferred modes. By prioritizing our students' input, we can build trust, honor autonomy, and create interventions that feel meaningful for our students. I love this strategy. I think it's just very practical. It makes a lot of sense that, when possible, and I think age comes into play here, but when possible, just really going to seek our actual students' perspectives when creating goals. Okay, our third strategy we're going to highlight and talk about today is emphasizing self-advocacy. Again, I don't feel like this is the groundbreaking. This is very, relevant in discussions around neurodiversity, but I think it's a very, very crucial strategy. So I want to think about how we've traditionally managed a student's needs in a classroom or therapeutic setting in the past. So sometimes when a student said, I need a break, we might have responded with, not now, or when they tried to leave a stressful situation, we might have tried to redirect them back to the lesson without considering the why. So while these approaches might maintain structure, they risk discouraging self-expression and undermine the development of vital self-advocacy skills. Now imagine instead we create a space for students to voice their needs and preferences. For example, a student could say, I'm feeling overwhelmed, and we respond with, thanks for telling me. What would help you feel better right now? This not only validates their emotions, but empowers them to recognize and communicate their needs effectively. Teaching self-advocacy isn't just about immediate classroom success, it's about equipping students with lifelong skills. So research shows that self-advocacy plays a critical role in navigating systems like education and employment. And methods like video modeling, as demonstrated in recent studies, can be particularly effective in teaching these skills to autistic students. By emphasizing self-advocacy, we aren't just giving students the tools to succeed in the moment, but we really are setting them up for success in their future relationships, jobs, and beyond. So one way to teach self-advocacy, video modeling. So you can see I have a little clip playing here on the screen. But I want to highlight this study that was conducted at the University of Austin, which demonstrated the effectiveness of teaching self-advocacy to autistic college students using video modeling. The study attempted to answer 3 questions. First, is the video model intervention successful at teaching self-advocacy skills to autistic students? Second, will students' self-ratings of confidence surrounding self-advocacy skills improve the video model intervention? And third, will autistic college students find the intervention helpful? So what did they find? The results demonstrated successful outcomes across the board for all participants. Participants showed quick acquisition of self-advocacy skills that they were able to maintain over time. They did find the intervention overall helpful and reported positive feelings as well. What I find really interesting and important about this particular study is that it had an emphasis on learning from autistic voices. So kind of what we just talked about in the last strategy. The second and third questions of the study really focused on how the individuals felt about the intervention and not just the success rate of the targeted skills. So this is just one study example of the power of video modeling and how it can really help our neurodivergent students learn these skills. I also want to think a little bit about how we manage student independence in the past. I think is really closely related to self-advocacy. So sometimes interventions have prioritized compliance over autonomy. And we've used, I'm guilty of using prompts or ignoring signs of distress just to get through a therapy session, or even removing a child's ability to say no. These practices might seem harmless in the moment, but they can have lasting consequences, leaving students passive, vulnerable, and unable to advocate for themselves. So instead, what if we embrace autonomy as a core principle of intervention? This means giving the students the freedom to say no and respecting their boundaries, whether verbal or nonverbal. For example, when a student resists a task, we could step back and say, it seems like this isn't working for you right now. How can we make this better? By respecting autonomy, we empower students to take ownership of their experiences and build the confidence to make decisions for themselves. Over time, this creates a foundation for self-respect, trust, and resilience, 3 skills I know we'd love to see and instill in our students.
So Casey, I am seeing in the chat a couple things. I just wanted to hop in because I'm seeing a couple
Yeah,
of the same questions and I just want to ease everyone's mind. So directly after this, we're going to be sending these slides over with the recording. So everyone will have access to, again, the slides and the recording. So don't worry there, please. You'll be able to take notes and go back and look at the slides. We're also getting a couple of requests just because a lot of people seems like are trying to take notes on this. So they're just hoping
sure.
you could slow down a little bit so they could catch everything, which is
Yeah.
great. I'm glad that this is so useful. And then there's a couple questions too about video modeling I'm seeing, which would be great, I think, right now to touch on, just so everyone knows as we keep mentioning it. So video modeling is an evidence-based practice. And this is really what I based our whole company on. As when I was working in the schools, I was working in schools, private practice, focusing on social skills primarily. And I found that just video modeling was so effective. And so what it is it's very simply just showing a model of a skill to students. And the research that we touched on a little bit earlier is that it's found there's been a lot of research since the 1980s till now. So there's current research, but it goes all the way back to the 80s that says it is 100% an evidence-based practice, very effective for teaching various academic, social, and functional life skills to students with autism. And so if anyone wants to access or see some samples of what these videos could look like, which I'm seeing a lot of questions about, you could look at, we're going to send you to our, the link to our website. You can definitely see that afterwards, but we also have a lot of free resources on YouTube and Pinterest. So if you want to check us out on YouTube, you can see a lot of free samples there, and then you can, get a great look at what these videos might be. We're also going to play a clip very shortly in a couple of slides.
Awesome. Thank you, Brittany. Appreciate you jumping in there. And I will try to slow down. I apologize. Originally, I'm from Chicago and we like to talk fast. Okay, so we're gonna move into the last, oops, wrong way. The last strategy, which is to celebrate personal growth over progress, or sorry, celebrate personal growth and not social conformity. So again, we're going to take another reflection moment. I know we're doing lots of reflection, but I think it is important to our discussion today. So let's take a moment to reflect on how we often have defined progress in the past. So too frequently, we celebrate milestones that align with neurotypical standards, like refraining from stimming, without considering whether these changes align with the student's comfort or their authentic self. Well, this might not, while this might look like success or progress on the surface, it can reinforce masking, like we talked about earlier, where students really are suppressing their natural behaviors to fit in. And over time, this can lead to burnout, emotional exhaustion, and reduced well-being. So what if instead we celebrated growth in ways that are meaningful to our students? So for example, recognizing when a student gains confidence expressing their needs, feels more comfortable in communication, and learns to regulate their emotions in a way that works for them. These are milestones that truly matter because they reflect personal growth and not social conformity. As practitioners, it's crucial to continually ask ourselves, are we setting goals that align with the student's priorities, or are we projecting neurotypical or social norms onto them? By celebrating strengths, honoring passions, and respecting autonomy, we can create interventions that support both happiness and our students' well-being. We can continue evaluate the motivations driving the decisions around our intervention targets and not assume that things that make a good neurotypical life are identical to autistic priorities. And I think that's a really core piece there. Interventions really should respect and enhance those things that bring happiness and joy for our neurodiverse students. Okay. I'm going to give a little bit of recap. I know that was a lot of information. Hopefully I didn't speed through it too quickly, but I am excited to just, like you said, throw it over to Brittany, and she's going to show you some of those video models that we talked about in just a moment here. So let's take a quick little recap. The bottom line, what we talked about in the beginning, was that compliance-based practices can cause harm. And the good news is that neurodiversity-affirming practices prioritize empowerment, choice, and authenticity. So avoiding these harmful practices requires a paradigm shift. We're moving away from compliance to collaboration. We're shifting from fixing deficits to amplifying strengths. And we're transitioning from prioritizing social norms to valuing autonomy and personal growth. By doing so, we create spaces where neurodiverse students can thrive authentically and confidently. We're going to take a final reflection, and I really just want us to all ask ourselves, what is a change that I can make starting tomorrow to better support my neurodivergent students? My hope is that with some of the information that I shared with you today, you feel more confident to provide neurodiversity affirming care. Empowering our neurodivergent learners requires an ongoing commitment to learning, confronting our biases, and just reevaluating our practices. Something I know as a lifelong learner is both exciting, scary, and thrilling. And I really hope that we can just continue some of our discussion here as a group and learn from each other. So I'm going to throw it over to Brittany. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thankful for all, I'm very thankful for all the thoughtful questions that are happening in the chat. I hope we can get to every single one because they're really incredible questions. And I think we can speak to all of them. So that to say, we will hopefully get through all of those. And there's going to be a little bit of time coming up as well soon to have a live Q&A. All right, so I did want to talk a little bit about how we have adapted and have thought about incorporating some of these neurodiversity affirming practices into our work at Everyday Speech. And thank you so much, Casey, for everything that you shared. Okay, so first is including emphasis on self-advocacy in all of our lessons. So students are learning how to advocate for their needs across settings. As the research states, video modeling is an important and effective tool to teach self-advocacy skills. We heard a little bit about that from that study coming out of the University of Austin. And so we've created new lessons around using self-advocacy at work, in school, and with friends. So as people have been asking, I'm going to show a short clip of one of our videos that's called Self-Advocacy at School.
I need something to help me with this noise. Headphones will make this easier for me. I just need to ask. Coach Martin, the noise in the gym is very overwhelming. So can I with my headphones, please?
Oh, of course, Rose.
So that's just a short clip kind of showing the scene of how the student is positively able to advocate for what they need in the moment because the gym was too loud. And so this is one of our newer videos. It comes also with accompanying worksheets, web games, so your students can start to learn these skills in a variety of ways. And our videos are typically anywhere from like 4 to 6 minutes long, just so you get a sense of that. And so yes, that was just a positive model of showing this skill in a real life scenario. The next clip I'm going to show is another new video lesson called Going to an IEP Meeting. So again, in this scene, we're going to see a student speaking up for his accommodations and what he needs at his IEP meeting. I used to work in a high school setting, and most of my students at the age of 14 in Massachusetts, where I was located, were required to come into the IEP meetings with us. And they were so nervous to do it. And I think it was a really big deal for them to come in. And then, it was one thing to sit and listen but to be able to express themselves and their needs and wants was just that one step level that was really intimidating for them across like looking at the team of adults in the room. And so that's something that I really, really was mindful of in thinking about creating these resources and having them for our students. So we can take a look at this clip.
This meeting is for Ethan's annual IEP review. He is showing great progress in math.
Well, that's fantastic news.
So I'm considering changing his math goal to a self-advocacy goal. What do you all think of that?
I use my current math accommodations to be successful. I need to speak up. I think we need to keep my current math accommodations.
That's a valid point, Ethan. Can you explain more why you feel your math accommodations are important?
Well, the use of a calculator and the extra time on tests really helped me a lot.
All right, so again, we kind of see that positive behavior model, and the students are able to take a look at that and say, okay, well, I could do that in my own life and come to my own meeting and talk about what I need to be successful and comfortable. All right, another thing that we have been thinking a lot about recently, believe it or not, we started this company in 2014. So we have had videos around for a long time now, coming up on the 11-year mark, which is crazy to me. And so, when we first started, we thought a lot about rooting our videos in social behavior mapping and really thinking about the consequences, understanding the natural consequence of an interaction, or if you have an unsuccessful communication attempt or behavior, what is the consequence going to be of that, the social consequence for the people around you? And what this used to look like a lot in our videos was, we have video thought bubbles that are revealing the inner thoughts of how peers might be feeling about you. And while that can be very, very helpful in the moment, it also, could be shining a light a little bit more on negativity and, oh, peers might have negative thoughts about you. And so that didn't feel great to us anymore. So over time, we've moved away from focusing on those differences of how people might be feeling, and talk about, well, it's okay. We might all have different feelings in a moment or respond to an incident in a different way. But let's just talk about what strategies feel good for us or how we might view a situation differently. Maybe focus more on the perspective taking aspect than saying that there's a right or a wrong way to be, thinking about people, not just highlighting so much of that negativity. And then in the same vein, our lessons, I would say a little bit in the past, used to we've shifted away so much from the path of like, well, this is a right behavior and this is a wrong behavior. And now try to think about, well, you know what? There's multiple ways to do a skill, and that's okay. And so now when it's applicable, we're showing multiple ways to do the same skills or offering views of different strategies that you could use in the same moment rather than only focusing on, a right or a wrong behavior. Okay, and one more thing that's been really important to us here is hiring authentic actors. So we've really made an effort to hire actors who are representative of the students who are watching our videos, which could be anyone. And so, really showing that authentic representation of students of all ages and all abilities. We specifically have had requests recently to represent the deaf and hard of hearing community. So this is just an example where one actor we had uses a cochlear implant. So it's something I handle all of the casting for all of our videos every single year. And it's something that's very, very important to me. I'm trying to be as inclusive as we can, not only in our live actor hires, but in our illustrations and our animations as well. So you'll see we try to implement characters visually who, have all different abilities. We have some in wheelchairs, some with prosthetics, cochlear implants, really just trying to be very inclusive. Okay, and this was the last change or shift I was going to focus on. And it's been really about creating videos that are celebrating and learning about differences. We want the students in the building to understand that, we're not only understanding and accepting learning differences, but there's something to celebrate. And so this is just an example of a video about being proud of who you are. And, we all have differences, but we're going to celebrate and respect each other regardless of those differences. And it's also nice because I feel like it serves as a peer model. So you can, for the peers in the building, they can start to understand, oh, well, that's maybe why this person learns differently or is communicating differently. So just kind of building that awareness across the school. Okay, so we do want to have this time for questions. One I want to get to, I saw in the chat actually, Casey, if you want to flip real quickly to the next slide. Some people are requesting articles that they could be bringing in or citations. So we have this and we have another page of our references, and these are wonderful articles. So please, anybody, once you have the slides, you'll have access to these, so you can feel free to use these. Some people were saying, I'd love to bring some of these articles and references to use and share in my building. All right, we're also going to launch a feedback survey. So we're going to have a poll. If you don't mind answering this, please just give us some honest feedback about if you felt like this was helpful for you. And let's see, if we want to take maybe 5 minutes or, I think we have 10 minutes left. So we could, Casey, do we want to pick a couple questions and answer them live?
Sure. If you have the chat up and want to read us some aloud.
Perfect. Let me see. I'm trying to pick ones that I've seen over and over to make sure we're getting to the pressing ones. So really nice compliments. Thank you guys. I'm very appreciative of people saying they've had success with our videos. People saying they really love the thought bubbles because they help develop theory of mind in students, and that was definitely the intention. So someone had asked a question about how are our videos different than just social stories? Is it just because we use a video format? And they're very similar, but we have a couple differences, I would say. So our video lessons, we have a couple of varieties across different ages. So we have lessons for pre-K and kindergarten students. They work well for first graders too. And they're very engaging. We have an animated cast, and those videos are super popular. But they are, there's intentional differences and changes between our pre-K videos, our elementary videos, and our middle and high school videos. That being said, they all follow a very similar format of we introduce a skill, we break it down into manageable steps. That is typically seen as an animated introduction. So we see that being modeled. And then we also show the live model afterwards. So typically there's 2 scenes where you're seeing the skill that doesn't go as planned. We have the inner thought bubbles of the students who talk about, okay, how did this make me feel? What's a strategy I could use in this moment? And then we'll show the skill again, and it's occurring in this positive, successful way. And that's the format of our videos. Oh, I see actually a chat from somebody who works at the school that I used to work at, and we filmed about 3 years worth of videos at this school. I'll shout out Whitman Hanson in Massachusetts. So thank you so much. I'm so glad that you use these videos. That's exciting. All right, scrolling through, I'm trying to see more questions. I'm actually just seeing a lot of comments, which is awesome. A lot of people asking for the research, which now we will have in our slides, so you'll have access to that. Maybe this could be the last one. I saw a couple questions about, and this is a tricky one, so maybe we could all weigh in on this one. But there were some questions around the balance between what if you have a student who's just protesting something that they don't want to do versus a true, a difference in something that maybe doesn't feel comfortable for them. So maybe we could use the example of eye contact, Casey, and kind of talk through what the changes we've made around that.
Sure. Yeah, I think, oh, go ahead, Bryce.
I was just going to finish by saying, I think the true distinction there is comfort. I think our duty is to teach a skill, but if it's going against with what a student or a learner is comfortable with and it's causing discomfort or harm, that's the line.
Yeah, and I think in a lot of our lessons too, we make an emphasis of offering options for the student. It's not, like I said in the beginning of the presentation, oftentimes a lot of social skills are not black and white, and that offers us a lot of, it's really great. There's some variability in different ways to communicate. So in the example of eye contact, in the past, we might have said, you need to look the person in the eye to make eye contact when you're communicating. And instead we're offering the option of, there's another strategy called visual referencing, and, why people use, still explaining the concept of eye contact and why, a neurotypical person might utilize that, but that it's not something that a neurodiverse person has to use to be able to communicate effectively.
I love that. And someone in the chat also had pointed out that at their school, they encourage our students to participate in some way. So giving them different options, just like you said, Casey, that would definitely meet their comfort level. Okay, awesome. All right, let's give a couple more minutes for questions.
Brittany, we've got lots of great questions in the Q&A. If you want to look there to go through.
Oh, perfect. So somebody did point out, do your videos translate to the preschool level for students who are still learning language? And so for there, I would say we have items such as visual tools and icons, and we try to use a language level that is appropriate for those early learners. But if they're truly a nonverbal student, I think you might require a little bit of scaffolding or pre-watching the videos to, maybe watch them a couple times to have it to be appropriate to that level. Let's see some more. My students love Operation Pizza. Are there going to be more topics for that game? That's one of our popular web games. So I can't say 100% yes. We haven't made the game schedule for next year, but typically what we do is game series. And so I think we have over about 30 different types of games. And then within that, we give different topics of the game. So we might have a game, and it's the same game, Operation Pizza, where you have to work together on teams to make pizza, but then there's questions about different skills. So we have a problem solving one, a conversation skills one, an emotional recognition one. So usually, yes, there'll be many different series of games. Okay. A couple of just great ideas for topics, which is great. So we check in, we do a lot of user feedback check-ins and surveys each year when we're developing. Every single year we put out typically around 50 new video lessons. And so we always look to our users to say, well, what topics do you need? We're always looking for more. So love the ideas for topics here. This is really helpful for us as we create new content each year. Let's see what else is included in everyday speech. I'm new. Yeah, so everyday speech. Again, definitely please check us out. We have free samples on YouTube, free samples on our website, just everydayspeech.com. But we are primarily a digital curricula for teaching social skills and social emotional learning. So we have tier 2 and 3 tracks and tier 1 tracks with whole class lessons. And we include video lessons, as we saw samples of today, interactive worksheets, and then also web games. Could you please provide goal examples? That is a really great idea. I love the idea of writing, sample goals that are focusing on being neurodiversity affirming. And something we already have within our platform is a goal bank. So we have sample goals already written for every single, we had 86 goals. So Casey, I'm trying to remember how many we'd written in total. I think it was over, 100 at least.
Yes, definitely. There's at least a one-to-one, if not more, for every single goal in there. So there's at least a large goal bank.
Mm-hmm. Somebody asked kind of more of a technical question. Do you consider ADHD as neurodiversity as well? So yes, I believe the definition is any learning difference. So it can include autism, as we mentioned, ADHD, specific language disorder. I really think it's categorized as any learning difference. So in that sense, when we think about the world, it is very neurodiverse. I don't know if we can run the poll again. I don't know if that's possible. A couple of people were saying that it disappeared on them. Do you have videos that address aggressive behaviors like hitting or throwing objects? We do have a behavioral skill with sample goals underneath it. So we do have videos on just being safe, thinking about safety. Let's see. What percentage of your webinars have you revamped to be neurodiversity affirming? I would say moving forward, all of them will be. It's definitely something that has been on our mind for the past couple of years and will continue to be. All right, looks like we're wrapping up. So thank you everyone so much. Just really appreciate your time. Looking forward to learning together. And definitely check us out if you haven't yet.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
All right. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you.